For decades, the CF-18 Hornet was the backbone of Canada's air defense. Introduced in the 1980s, it flew everywhere the Royal Canadian Air Force needed it, defending domestic skies, standing shoulder to shoulder with NATO around the world. But age is not just a number, it is a countdown. And as the global security landscape shifted beneath it, the aircraft that once represented strength began to represent risk. The danger wasn't nostalgia, it was capability. Rival powers were fielding advanced air defense networks, sophisticated electronic warfare systems. Next-generation fighters built for a battle space, the CF-18 was never designed to survive. To remain a credible NATO partner, to fulfill its NORAD obligations, Canada needed more than a replacement. It needed an answer. What followed became one of the most consequential defense procurement programs in Canadian history. Not simply a shopping list for new jets. A decision about how Canada would defend an almost unimaginable expansive territory, how it would stand inside Allied operations, how it would prepare for threats that didn't yet have names. Billions of dollars. National security. The world was watching, and the world's biggest aerospace powers came calling, each one offering a different vision of Canada's future in the sky. The presumed favorite. When the search began, most analysts assumed the outcome was already written. The F-35 Lightning II, a fifth-generation stealth fighter built through a sprawling multinational program led by the United States, looked on paper unbeatable. Canada had been a partner nation in that program for years, its companies embedded in the aircraft's development, its industry already profiting from the contracts. The assumption wasn't a guess, it was inertia, and the strategic case was real. Canada and the United States share one of the most tightly bound defense relationships on Earth through NORAD, the joint command responsible for protecting the airspace of an entire continent. Interoperability wasn't a preference. It was the architecture the whole partnership was built on. The F-35 was engineered to slot directly into American systems, American doctrine, American command structures, and as NATO ally after NATO ally signed on to the same jet, it began to look less like a purchase and more like a foregone conclusion. The only real question left, most believed, was whether anything could challenge a program carrying the full industrial and strategic weight of America behind it. A quiet challenger emerges. Then quietly, a different aircraft began to complicate the story. Built in Sweden, the Saab Gripen entered the race with a philosophy that owed nothing to its American rival. Where the F-35 chased stealth and sensor dominance, Saab pursued something else entirely. Affordability, adaptability, sovereign resilience. Not every Air Force, as Saab argued, needed to pay a fifth-generation price to get fifth-generation relevance. Saab had also done its homework on Canada specifically, a nation defending one of the largest airspaces on the planet. Much of it Arctic, much of it remote, much of it unforgiving. The Gripen was engineered for rapid maintenance, lower lifetime costs, and the ability to operate from dispersed, austere locations far from major infrastructure. And then came the masterstroke of the offer itself. Extensive technology transfer, deep opportunities for domestic Canadian industry, a level of industrial partnership the competition struggled to match. This was no longer a courtesy entry in the competition. This was a calculated challenge to the assumption that the outcome was already decided. Built for practicality. As the competition sharpened, the Gripen's advantage revealed itself in a currency most people overlook: usability. While rival programs chased raw performance ceilings, Saab built around a different question. What happens when the war lasts years, not weeks? Cost was the first pillar. The Gripen was designed to be cheaper to fly and maintain across its entire service life. A decisive fact for a nation planning to operate its next fighter for a generation. Maintainability was the second. Small ground crews, fast turnaround, aircraft rearmed and back in the sky before rivals could finish their checklists. Resilience measured not in specifications, but in operational tempo sustained under pressure. But the deepest layer of the Gripen's design was its philosophy of dispersed operations. The ability to fly from short runways, remote airstrips, even hardened road surfaces, a survivability doctrine born from Sweden's own strategic geography. For a country tasked with defending vast, thinly connected northern territories, this wasn't a technical footnote. It was strategic patience, engineered into steel and titanium. Strategic stakes beyond the aircraft. This was never simply a hardware decision. Because of Canada's unique defense relationship with its southern neighbor, every choice carried weight far beyond the runway. Through NORAD, Canada and the United States have spent decades building a shared architecture of continental defense, detecting threats together, coordinating responses together. Whatever aircraft Canada chose had to function inside that shared system without friction. The stakes extended outward as well. As a core NATO member, Canada's ability to operate inside networked, allied combat environments, sharing intelligence, integrating seamlessly with partner forces, sat at the center of the decision. This is why the world watched so closely. It was never only about which jet flew faster. It was about how Canada's future in the sky would be woven into the wider fabric of Western defense, and whether a different thread, a Swedish thread, might have been woven in instead. Two philosophies of air warfare. At its core, this was a clash between two visions of modern combat. The F-35 represented sensor fusion and low observability, a machine built to see everything while remaining unseen. The Gripen represented something else, networked flexibility, electronic warfare dominance, and the sovereign resolve to adapt quickly when the old playbook stopped working. Neither philosophy was wrong. One trusted stealth and total information dominance through a tightly integrated system. The other trusted resilience, speed of adaptation, and cost-effective endurance. For Canada, this was never a simple spec sheet comparison. It was a choice between two futures of air power, each one a defining test of what the next generation of Canadian defense would actually look like. What if Canada had chosen the Gripen? The question remains hypothetical, but hypotheticals reveal what mattered most. A Gripen win would not have simply changed the aircraft in the hangar. It would have introduced an entirely different operational philosophy into one of the most important defense partnerships on Earth. Flexibility and dispersed resilience instead of centralized stealth. Logistics would have shifted. Training would have shifted. The ability to defend the remote north from scattered, austere locations could have redrawn how Canada thought about sovereignty itself. And Canada would still have needed seamless cooperation with American forces through NORAD and NATO. Proof that this was never a decision about performance alone. It was a quiet transformation in how a middle power balances autonomy against alliance. The underdog that stayed the course. Despite facing the most heavily backed fighter program in the Western world, Saab's offer never collapsed. It stayed credible until the final stage of the process. A rare feat against that kind of industrial and political weight. The reason was strategic patience, expressed through industrial partnership, technology transfer, domestic production opportunities, long-term economic value for Canadian industry. Not just a purchase, but an investment in sovereign capability. Saab tailored its pitch precisely to Canada's Arctic realities and long-term cost calculus. Even skeptics conceded the offer was serious. That is precisely why it remained in contention until the very end, forcing decision-makers to weigh far more than raw combat metrics. The decision. After years of evaluation, the answer finally came. Canada selected the F-35 Lightning II, sensor fusion, stealth, deep interoperability with American and NATO forces. These were the deciding factors, the calculated conclusion of a process built around long-term strategic alignment. But the outcome should never diminish what the competition revealed. The Gripen forced a reckoning with cost, flexibility, and industrial sovereignty that a less serious challenger never could have. It proved that modern defense procurement is never just about performance. It is about partnerships, industrial resilience, and the architecture of long-term power. Was the U.S. really worried? As the competition drew global attention, one question lingered. Was America genuinely unsettled by the possibility of a Gripen win? The honest answer is more nuanced than the headline suggested. There is little evidence it was viewed as a direct threat to American military dominance. But Canada's decision always carried weight, given the depth of the NORAD and NATO relationship binding the two nations together. What the Gripen proved was something larger. Even inside a market dominated by giants, there remains room for alternative visions of air power, for sovereign resolve expressed through cost-effectiveness and adaptability rather than sheer industrial mass. Modern air forces no longer measure value in speed and firepower alone. Interoperability, life cycle cost, long-term strategic value. These are the new instruments of calculation. What do you think about all this? Tell us in the comments below. See you in the next one.